Today we're going to talk about the Z6ii. I've had lots of people ask me how I'm getting on with the Z6ii after swapping from my D780 to the Z6ii. How did I find it? How did it compare? How's it compared to my Z5? And whilst this isn't going to be a proper review, it's going to be my thoughts as a working photographer on how this thing works, how it performs, and I'll keep it fairly short and sweet because I know I do tend to waffle on a bit. Right, I changed. First of all, why did I change? Why did I change from the D780 to this guy? Couple of important things. Image stabilization. I use a lot. In fact, I use all apart from one 24-70 zoom lens. Every other lens I've got is a prime lens. None of them have got image stabilization. 58 and the 85 are probably my favourite G lenses on the FTZ adapter. And having image stabilization occasionally is useful. Certainly for video, it's pretty much essential. And whilst the video performance of the D780 was light years ahead of any other Nikon DSLR, it's still pretty rubbish without image stabilization. So you needed a lens with VR, which I didn't have. So that was one thing. The viewfinder. There's something about an optical viewfinder, and I still love an optical viewfinder, but I make my living photographing people in all sorts of different lighting situations, and having the ability to get the correct exposure before I take the shot, what's the correct exposure? And I don't always know what the correct exposure is going to be. I know if I'm photographing, as I did on Sunday, a wedding with the bride and groom sort of during the ceremony, with huge great windows behind them on a sunny day, I'm going to have to overexpose the image, otherwise they're just going to be a silhouette against the background. Yeah, I can use spot metering and I can, but you know, it's all guesswork. And with the DSLR, you get around that by taking a test shot, have a look, adjust the compensation, take another one, nearly there, you know, second adjustment, okay, we're okay now. Now, of course, depending on what type of metering, what area metering you're using, if you change your composition, that could well change unless you lock the exposure. So it all gets a bit complicated. With this, of course, I see what I'm taking a photo of. I can see if they're too dark for this shot, adjust the compensation, take that shot, recompose. Now I need to change the compensation a bit more, take that, and it's pretty much I can get the exposure right every single time without doing test shots. And you can be a bit more creative. You can, I mean, I took some shots on Sunday where I purposely got silhouettes, and that's much easier to do with an electronic viewfinder than with an optical viewfinder. So that was that. The focusing system. So the focusing system on a Z camera, we've got pretty much the entire screen to focus on, rather than the limited DSLR area. So the area is much better. The actual focus itself, I'm still not convinced that it's any better. We've got face detect and eye autofocus, which has now got to a point with Nikon with the latest 1.44 firmware update, with the small, rather than just having the wide screen, the full screen for face and eye autofocus, we can now use a smaller box, and I find that works really well for face detect and eye autofocus. The trouble with the big area, which is what the Z5 has got, but the Z6ii with the update has now got the smaller one. With the big box, the whole screen, if you've got more than two people in the image, it will often just randomly switch to someone in the background, to a guest sitting 10-15 feet behind the bride and groom. And no matter what I try and do, it will not come back to the bride and groom. So in that case, I've got a button set up to use the, what's it called? The little tracking box, the little white box in the middle. Put that on the bride and groom, and that's fine. So that's not a huge deal. You know, it works perfectly well. But by having the smaller box, I don't get that problem in the first place. I photograph people. If you are a bird photographer or wildlife or whatever, sports, my experience, I would suggest that you're probably still better off with a DSLR. I think for fast tracking of things like wildlife and sports, I don't think, in my view, I don't do that sort of photography, but from what I know, I don't think a Z camera is any better than, say, a D780, D780 or a D5, D850. I think they're going to be a better choice still, unless you can afford to go to a D9. If you can go to a D9, well, brilliant, you're going to get mind-blowing autofocus. But staying in the real world, I wouldn't bother switching to a Z camera. Also, the lenses. I do now have a few Z lenses, only the cheap ones. I've got the 40 f2, the 28 2.8, and recently got the 24 to 70 f4 zoom lens, all Z mounts. And they're beautiful lenses. I have to say, they give wonderfully sharp images. However, Nikon do not do 1.4 prime lenses. I think I'm right in saying that. They don't do any 1.4 prime lenses for the Z mount, which is a shame, because I don't want a £5 lump of glass that's a 50mm 1.2 that after using it for 10 minutes I'm going to have to put the thing down because it weighs so much, and is about 3 times the size of this guy here. You know, I mean, the 51.2 is kind of out here somewhere, and it weighs, I mean, this is very light. It weighs probably 4 times as much as that. I don't want that. I also don't want a 1.8. It's just not fast enough. I want a 1.4. It's what professional wedding photographers have used for goodness knows how long. Why aren't Nikon making that? I do not understand it. Hence why I've still got all of my Nikon F-mount prime lenses on the FTZ adapter, which by the way works brilliantly. It's no different at all to using the Z-mount lens. It just does the job. So have I covered everything as to why I changed? Smaller and lighter than the DSLR, which for me after 8 or 9 hours at a wedding does make a difference. Quieter, a heck of a lot quieter, which for me as a wedding photographer makes a difference. I actually had a couple of weddings ago, the registrar came up to me afterwards and said, "Did you actually take any pictures?" Because the shutter was so quiet, she didn't even think I was taking pictures. It wasn't on silent, it's just its normal, very quiet click, and that's it. So for that reason, again, as a wedding camera, it works. Programmability. You can got a lot more buttons to program than on a DSLR. You've got the user functions, which U1, U2, U3, which I never used on the D780, but has a lot more meaning because I've got those set to different focus modes, and it makes life really, really easy. As far as image quality goes, no difference. If you're buying this to get better quality images, you're wasting your money. It's no better than the D780, which is that much better than the D750. If you go up to the D850 with its much higher resolution, then I don't know. I've never had a D850, but obviously it means you can do a lot more cropping. You've probably got some more resolution, but that's only going to help you if you've got the right lenses. So that's my take on the Z6. Compared to the Z5, if you're thinking of going to a Z camera, do you get the Z5 or the Z6 II? Depends what you want it for. I'm sure that for most people, the Z5 would be totally adequate. If you think a Z camera is going to help your photography, it's going to be the thing that you want to use. The only reason the Z6 II is better for me, faster burst rate. The Z5 only shoots, was it 4 frames a second, which can be a little bit slow for something like throwing the confetti, throwing the bouquet, and a few other action type wedding shots. It's a little bit slow. You really want 6 or 8. So the Z6 II obviously does that. Low light AF performance. The Z6 II is probably, again, that much better than the Z5. It's really, really slight. It's only going to be noticeable on things like, for me, the first dance. And then it would just mean that I get 9 out of 10 shots in focus with the Z6 II, and I'll get 8 out of 10 in focus with the Z5. You know, it's not night and day. They are fairly close still. And again, image quality, although this has got a backside illuminated sensor, Z5 hasn't. They're both 24 megapixels, and I couldn't tell you which photo came from which camera just by looking on the screen. Doesn't make any difference at all. The thing that does make a difference, and this is the end then, the thing that does make a difference is the lens. I mentioned earlier that I've got some Z mount lenses, and they are lovely lenses, but they are very modern. They have a sharp, very contrasty, very detailed, punchy sort of look to them. They don't have the dreamy, artistic, character-filled look that the G mount lenses have got, the 1.4G lenses. The 85, the 58, and the 1.4, not the 1.4 so much, but the 58 and the 85 just have this character that's just absolutely, it's unique, and the Z lenses lose that. Yes, you can put it back in Lightroom, but it's much nicer to have it in the first place. That is my take on the Z6 II. So it's right for some people, not for others. It's a bargain for some people, not for others. So it's like any camera. Is it the right tool for what you do? For me, it is. I hope that's been kind of useful. Thanks for watching. Cheers.